how do you see the connection between the art of dissent as a documentary aligning with the theme of the festival this year, of Karama Human Rights Festival this year, which is the memory of being?
The title of the festival, The Memory of Being, is exactly perfect. I mean, I couldn't have dreamed this up better, I think, in a certain sense, because we wanted to make a movie that was essentially that, how we think about being in the world, the art of being human. And as you know, the end of the movie, it ends with a comment on the horizon of being, which is a philosophical concept that's really important to Václav Havel and some of the dissidents. And we wanted to have a philosophical meditation on the relation of being and time, which is kind of, the existential Martin Heidegger worldview. And that the idea of the movie for us is really important because we wanted to bring to life the philosophy of dissent, which is really connected to being and time and memory, right?
This takes me to my second question, as a matter of fact. Opposition, dissent, is it really an art? I mean, what makes it an art, and when can you call it an art? Or was the title of the film created by chance to contain this word?
I think it became an art when we were thinking about the titles. First, we did a title search on IMDb, and at the time, there was no other film that was listed with that title, right? So when we started to think about titles, we had first actually wanted to call it a beautiful film, right? Because we wanted to make a movie about the beautiful movements of democratic opposition, of struggle, of dissent, right? But then we began to think about how we would actually create the storyline of the movie. It's a little hard to make a movie about dissent, calling it the beautiful film, right? A beautiful film, and also the art of the impossible. That's Václav Havel's other book title. And so when we began to think about the movie and structuring it, we wanted to kind of create like the art of dissent, the art of dissenting, really, in opposition to authoritarianism. And then the art of the impossible, which is Havel's title in English for one of his books. So we created a kind of hybrid title to kind of capture that. And it helped us in structuring the film. It helped us in a particular way. When we began to edit the movie, my original version of the movie was 6 hours long. It was 3 parts, 2 hours each, right? At Czech TV, every time we kept talking about this, they're horrified of like making a 6-hour movie. Like, I have to say, I kind of, I wish we had done the 6-hour version too, because we left out so much great material. But having it being the art of dissent helped us structure it. So we just focus on the artists who were in opposition to the state using art to dissent, right? And it became an art form. Networking became an art form. And it was important that the artists were kind of the centerpiece of the dissident movement in Czechoslovakia, right? So anyway, that's how the title came in. Good. So that's how the title came about. And then I think when we edited it, it really helped us determine which pieces of film got left out and which pieces got put in. So my editor, Evgenia, was incredibly determined not to allow me to stray from that line, right? So everything in the movie is the art of dissent. And she kept saying it to you, you're making a movie called The Art of Dissent. We need to stick on that line. It was very helpful, I think, to have an editor so determined to keep me from wandering around the film archives.
What happens after a state is no longer a police state? How to manage, control these people, in the sense of keeping law and order. The gangs and the drugs problem, and this is a very, very much hurtful facts that happen. Yeah, it was nice, a fairy tale that the intellectuals could rule. Havel took the artists and his colleagues that they were with him in the streets to the palace with him. Yeah, that's great. But then again, a country needs rule, law, and order. And then if you hadn't shown what came after, I think I would have lost. As someone who did, I know a bit of the history, but for someone who doesn't know anything about the history, you would, that person would not see these issues and realize
Yeah,
that these big questions to be asked and to be thought of.
that's mhm. That's kind of like where the historian in me came out. You know, the filmmakers that I was working with kind of really wanted to end it with that Velvet Revolution part because it's a great story. It's a great cinema story, right?
Yeah.
The Rolling Stones, everybody there, Frank Zappa, you know,
Yeah.
And it's really cool. It's really fun, right? But it's not what is. If you go to Czech Republic now, you know, corruption in politics is that's something that people are discussing, right? The inability of the courts to kind of deal with those issues, and also just honestly how hard it was to transform a command economy to a market economy, right? And it's a really hard thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And as much as people dislike some of the things that Václav Klaus did, I have to say that, you know, he had a really difficult job, right? And so did Václav Havel as a president, you know, trying to kind of navigate this stuff. And Václav Havel, by there's this thing called the bad mood speech, you know, which he gave, and then we kind of focus on it in the movie, kind of at the end, because at a certain point, Václav Havel talks publicly about the failures of the Velvet Revolution. Right.
Yeah.
And that willingness to disclose his own failure and the failures of the politicians to really navigate that storm, that maelstrom, that 10-year period of transition is really important because it also shows the intellectual and dissident aspects of his life, where, you know, you can't make political change unless you're honest, right? Yeah. And call people on it. Right. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It was really hard to do that in storytelling, to tell you the truth. It was really hard because of a kind of a complex issue. But there was one thing Václav Havel does say in that speech. We didn't use it, and he says it elsewhere. The great achievement of the Velvet Revolution is actually in, and I wanted to focus on, I've been thinking about making another movie about this part of it, is on the ecological and environmental issues that they dealt with. That's why when we talk about that one speech where he's talking in the town square about the legacy of the Soviet Empire, that's why and the destruction of the environment and the legacy of authoritarian communism and the destruction of the environment. And he says people were, you know, they were breathing sulfur, they were drinking poisoned water, right? But he says, you know, in the bad mood speech, he also says, this was our achievement. Like, we did it. And at the end of the film, we had this kind of discussion about how to play this out. I turned back to the theme of your festival, memory and being, because I'm a writer, I'm a historian, and I work on intellectuals. And I really kind of wanted to stick to the theme of Havel, right? There was another thing we could have done, and we had the film pulled for it and cut and ready to go, which was that we were going to drop in films of protests from Hong Kong, environmental destruction and wildfires in California, all that stuff. And then to show, like, the fact is they had solved the environmental problems more or less for the Czech Republic. And then they got swallowed up by the rest of the world. Right. And environmentalism, they controlled their own house, and then their houses around them started burning. Right. And that's kind of a sad part about what happens to the Czech Republic, but it's also what happens in the economy too. Right. They embrace the market system only to be swallowed up by the crisis of the market system. Right. And that's kind of like but this is where people are in the world today. Right. And we can't have we just can't have this naive kind of, okay, capitalism won against communism. I'm not that kind of historian. I'm not even
that's
close
my
to being
following question, as a matter of fact. My following up question on this is, you being an American, and documenting this about the falling of the Soviet Union and the communist regime.
Mhm.
Have you been accused of being another pawn in the imperialistic machine, propaganda against the
Not,
socialists
I,
and resistance communists?
I haven't really directly been accused of it. I understand that some people would like to say nonsense like that. I mean, you can't watch the first part of the movie thinking that I'm a Yankee, right? You can't do it. We had like, I mean, it was really important for me not to be accused of that, right? I
Yeah,
didn't want to take Havel and the Velvet Revolution, and appropriate and put it in American discourse. That's not what I was trying to do, right?
yeah,
And for that, I wanted to be clear about my position on Vietnam, right? And the atrocities that, America in 68 was a nightmare, right? In 1968, America was the nightmare, right? If you think about it, right?
some
We were
would
involved in
argue that it's
Vietnam,
still a
uh,
nightmare.
right? Yeah. And the thing is, my point was to say, well, okay, but in the Czech Republic, which was a communist government, this other thing was happening, which was kind of a beautiful thing until, of course, the Soviets destroyed it. But nevertheless, right, I didn't want to be accused of that, because that's not my goal in making art, right?
Yeah,
I want to have a different kind of impact, but I do as a filmmaker really want to think seriously about intellectual questions, right?
yeah,
Um, and one of the ways to do that, I think, is by being honest. Now, of course, I don't like communist authoritarianism, but I also don't like unwielded free market capitalism, right? The Václav Klaus's idea, right?
yeah,
When he began to kind of criticize the environmentalism that Havel was working on, he began to kind of look to Milton Friedman and that whole group of Chicago
yeah,
economists who talk about, environmentalism as, negating my human rights and all that kind of stuff. And he pitched his anti-environmental kind of crusade as an intellectual based on those economic theories, which I have problems with, right?
yeah,
One of the things that I wanted to do is to bring to America, how subversive could you be, right, in American politics and today, is to use the Velvet Revolution as the kind of shining moment in American history, right? And when you think about the struggles, the kind of authenticity and the honesty that they had in those struggles, and to show, hey, this came out of a socialist system, right?
yeah,
I also wanted to protect myself against accusations from the right, right? In America, and to say, look, I'm not advocating for American imperialism, right? I'm not advocating for the dollar worldview, right? But I also think that it's important for the positive democratic aspirations to shine through. I can't imagine that anybody in the world would go to Congress now to give a speech about democracy. But no one would do that in this age that we live in right now. But that's the sad part for me as an American, because as part of my growing up as a kind of child of the Cold War, but a kind of somebody who was thinking about it critically, that was a great moment for us. Who would have thought that 1989 was our highlight? Or a little bit later, when Nelson Mandela came to the United States, the Congress, and gave a similar speech, right?
yeah,
That was the America that I wanted to have my kids inherit, right?
yeah,
It's gone. It's gone. I mean, we have a president right now who is sending out text messages contesting the election today, right? And here we are, like, transfer of power is going to happen in a couple, really soon.
yeah,
And I never would have imagined. Havel never would have imagined. But if you go back and watch the full speech in the U.S. Congress, you know what he says? He said, America was founded by intellectuals, right?
yes,
It takes someone to come from the communist world, right, out of that kind of world, to come to America to say, hey, America, you're the country who gave us the intellectuals in politics. Live up to it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And if you watch his speech in Congress, now the 1990 speech, it's unbelievable what he says, right? About the role of intellectuals. Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, all that was given to the world by intellectuals. That's the America I want to have, and of course it comes with all kinds of warnings and caveats about the,
Yeah.
not being complete, the incompleteness of the American Revolution, slavery legacy, and so on and so forth.
It's a
And anyway,
it
so
was a powerful speech by Haval, by the way. When he
what's that?
said it was a powerful speech, he really was someone who knew how to speak, how to attract his
Yeah.
audience. When he said
But
that, yeah,
yeah.
that 200 years
Go ahead.
later, they inspire us to be citizens, not to be democrats, not to be liberals, not to be citizens. It's He's a real intellectual in my opinion. He knew how to attract an audience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what but if you think about it in America, and I've written about this somewhat, and I'm going to write about it more. It's incredible that he says this, because the one thing that Americans are uncomfortable with is the role of intellectuals.
Yeah.
Right. And yet they talk about the founding fathers and their intent in the Declaration of Independence all the time. Those are intellectual ideas. They were created by the Enlightenment ideals of, modern Europeans immigrating to the United States, et cetera, right? And I just find it really strange that America has this problem. So what could be more seditious in the worldview right now than to use Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic as kind of our example of how to do democracy, right? Because right now we're struggling. And I think that's part of, one of the questions we want to ask in the film is, how do we use the memory of these experiences cinematically and artistically to engage these kinds of questions? And I think that is, for me, the role of art, at least that the art of this film that I wanted to kind of think through is, how do we do this with people? How do we get them to engage with ideas, right? And can you use movies to do it? This is the big question I think that we're asking. Are movies the vehicle for doing this? I mean, if we're moving to this age of movie making and cinema and new media, digital new media, and that kind of stuff, can we restore a world where intellectuals matter, right? And I think the answer is yes. Right. But it's also because maybe I am a child of that worldview where I do believe, that writers and artists actually matter.
Okay. So you just answered my last question for you, James. My last question was, what message or messages are you hoping that your film would be sending, or questions that you want your film to be asking? And you just answered that, but if you have something else to elaborate on it, please do.
Well, it's been interesting because my kids have been watching the last 4 or 5 years, right, develop, and they've also been watching me do this kind of work, right? And if anything, I think there's still hope out there, because the next generation is actually thinking about the stuff we're talking about, right? Yeah. My son, my daughter do debate. They're talking about these big questions, right? And they are struggling, like all the kids are around the world, to kind of come to terms with where we are in history, right? Yeah. And I think not just this film, but a lot of the films that you're showing at the festival, and a lot of films I've seen in festivals this year, are all struggling with these kind of similar questions about what is the role of art, right? What is the role of cinema, right? Can cinema move people? I think it can, right? And I think it has to. I mean, if it's just for entertainment, I don't want to do it, right? I mean, I could make TikTok videos or do whatever. My son and daughter do TikTok and have all these followers and all that stuff. I could do I mean, everybody could do that, right? I mean, in terms of, well, maybe not. I mean, some of these TikTok videos are funny, but that's not why I would do a movie, right? In the movie I'm working on right now, which is 4 Seasons of COVID, I'm actually struggling with a question, because I was in some of the protests in Nebraska this summer filming, and I saw things I just never would have imagined would happen where I live. And that's making me ask questions about myself, about where I live, because I've been in the streets watching tear gas fly around and stuff like that. I've been filming it all year, right? And I think, there's still a documentarian's role to kind of chronicle and tell the story as it is. That means telling all sides, right? And to tell it like in a way that would probably irritate a lot of people. They want you to take sides in projects. And the film I'm working on right now, 4 Seasons of COVID, I'm not going to take a side. I'm just trying to tell the story of this year as it unfolded in front of my eyes, at least, right? But I was in the streets, being afraid I was going to get hit with rubber bullets and stuff this summer. And that's kind of like where I am now. I'm more kind of a street photographer's filmmaker, and as I go forward in filmmaking. This first film was more of an historical archival research project for me. And that was a great advantage because I am a professional historian and I understand how to access, find, and use archives, right? And I think it's kind of clear that that's the kind of strength of the movie. But I also just have to say that Martin Boda, the archivist at Czech TV, Mariana Chapkova, the person I started the movie with, the producer, and the team that we had, Elena Juresic, Ivana Juresic, and so on and so forth. These were just unbelievably committed people. The thing is, no one's made any money on this movie. We're not trying to. We did it because we wanted to make a movie, right? People just volunteered.
Like we do also Karama.
Yeah. You just do it because people came from around the world. Elena worked tirelessly from Australia for 2 or 3 years with us to get this film set up. She reviewed all the film that we pulled. Martin Boda and I have an unbelievably cool friendship because we work together every day on a movie, pulling film. I would send him, well, this is what we need next, and can you look for this? And he would pull it from the archives. Sometimes I'd be in Prague working with him, but more often than not, we were doing it through the internet. And it was weird because I didn't sleep for 3 years. Literally because I was on 3 time zones. I was on Australian time, Prague time in the US. I swear to God, I didn't sleep for years. And I'm also a chair of a department. I was doing my other job, my daytime job most of the time. But the thing about it is that I learned, at least, is there's a community in filmmaking, which is being like, there's a sense of being together in film that I just find extraordinary. And it's really just to die for, because everybody who works in film is kind of the same way. I mean, they're just night owls. They work all the time. And they do it because they want to make art that's true and meaningful. So if I were to say that there's a message, is that if I, as an older person in life, finally achieved the dream that I wanted to do, which was to make a major feature film, feature documentary film, then anybody could do it, because I waited too long. Don't wait. So I guess that's more of my message. Work earlier, figure out how to do it, work together, find people who can do it, because it's a lot of fun. And it's really nice to know that the work that you've done and your team has done for years is out in the world, is like out in the world, right? Yeah. I'm on Jordan right now, right? Yeah. Watching with your festival. And to me, that's the reward of filmmaking, because you can touch people, and then everybody can, we're not trying to be dogmatic, right? Trying to tell people and just say, my experience was this is what I discovered. Maybe other people will discover certain things, right? Yeah, in watching a film like that. And interpretation is alive and real, and it changes over time. But hopefully, as people watch the movie, they can make up their own minds about, positions we took or things we left out. But, we had to cut out so much stuff.
Well, we have to wrap up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry going so long.
It's fine. Thank you very much for being with us. We are happy to have the Art of Dissent as part of Karama Human Rights Film Festival, the 11th edition, which is this year. And really glad and honored to have the film. We hope to see you soon in person, like probably your next film will align also with our following theme. Who knows? Yeah,
I hope it will. Well, we would love to come back and show the film in person at some point. You know, I think I have to say it's bravo to your team for pulling this off. It's been, I know it's hard for film festivals to do this right now.
yeah,
The only advantage of this whole system, as it played out this year, is it democratized film, and that's a good thing, because people
yeah,
who are not in Oman are watching the film and the other films in your festival now, and they're all over the world. They're in Australia, I know because my friends in there are telling me, right? They're in the Czech Republic, they're in England, they're in France. People are watching your festival everywhere. And the only silver lining in this year, I think, has been this one, that this has allowed you, artists, to reach an audience that we wouldn't have had before. And that's the weird silver lining in COVID. Everything else is awful.
yeah.
But as far as that goes, the fact that you pulled this off is a huge, it's a huge feat. You should just celebrate it. I wish we were there on New Year's Eve with you.
Yeah, we wish that. We wish that too. Our directors, there are two film and theatrical directors, Sausan Darwazi and Ihab. You met them before we started the interview. Actually, the whole screening was part of Ihab's ideas, and we're thinking of launching something similar throughout Jordan, throughout the neighborhoods of Amman, and create the neighborhood cinema, which is the neighborhood memory, etc. Because once you share experience with people, your language becomes similar as well. So you have a common language through common experience, and we are hoping to create this sense of romanticism in neighborhoods and so on through visual art.
You should. I mean, if anything, people are going to be watching it now, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you do it this year, especially this year, because people can't go to theaters, right? I don't think theaters are opening in Jordan,
No,
are they?
they're
They're not
not.
open, right? It's weird because you can go to the cinemas in the United States. I mean, it's social distancing, kind of weird. I haven't been to a cinema I'm not going in. I haven't been to a cinema for a year. So I think it's a great idea to do that kind of stuff. And also, you never know who you're going to inspire to become a filmmaker.
True.
That's the truth of this, because these people are going to see this, and and just imagine the other topics that emerging filmmakers are going to be able to do now, right? And there's this interesting part of this year, I think, which is how we should think about it, really. I mean, we should embrace the positive things, and learn from it. And if anything, I think all festivals have kind of seen. I don't think film festivals will ever be the same anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because they've reached an audience they didn't have before around the world, because most people cannot participate in film festivals, the average person, right? And even as a director, to tell you the truth, it's expensive to go to festivals, right? You have to have resources to do that. So this allows a lot of people to go to film festivals as directors and filmmakers who couldn't go there normally, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's also a positive thing about the democratization, if you want to call it that, of the industry. And I'm guessing that everybody's going to take something from this and turn it to their advantage. We've also learned, some bad things about other questions. But in terms of festivals, I think it's done something quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, after all, if there's anything the history shows us, is that humans adapt, and in adaptation we see more of the horizon and we expand it. Yeah.
That's what I think.
Oh, okay, that's great it's great to talk to you. Please give our regards to your team, your entire team, and my special regards to you and your team as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have your film, and we'll talk again soon on a personal mean, on the social
Yes.
media.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us. Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Bye bye.